really interesting fight at 155 pounds. We have a guy that we haven't seen in the octagon in some time in Gritz. Not Brandon Gritz, but Gritz. Chris Gruetzemacher taking on Alexander the Great Hernandez. Matt, Alexander Hernandez, he switched things up as of late. And I'd say late. It's been a little bit of time, but he's moved gyms over with Factory X, and you've seen this guy in the corner of a lot of your favorite fighters. I'm talking Moroccan Devil, Yusuf Zalal. The list goes on and on. Alexander Hernandez has spent a lot of time in Vegas and Fight Island with Mark Montoya and the gang, cornering a lot of fighters. We talk about that very positively. I mean, Michael Chiesa is one of those guys that you'd see in corners quite a bit. Michael Johnson, up until COVID times, is another one of those guys that you've seen. Now, it didn't work out a lot for Johnson in his overall fight career, but for Michael Chiesa, since he started to corner guys, he's really gained in terms of the Corey Anderson levels in this game. So for Alexander Hernandez, always good to see a student of the game, a younger guy too, and a guy in his last 3 fights. I know one of them a win over Francisco Trinaldo, but there's you can make a strong argument that Master Anduba won that fight. Before that, a loss to Donald Cerrone. He got finished, and he got finished by Drew Dober. Cerrone's a bit of a head scratcher. Like, Alexander Hernandez went out there and talked mad shit, and he got banged. And then in the fight against Drew Dober, that's one of those guys that, like, sneakily was putting together a crazy run, if sneakily's a word. And he clipped him, he hurt him bad, and it was a statement win for Drew Dober. So Hernandez looking to get back on the schneid, as they say. For Chris Gruetzemacher, I look at this guy's last 5. We're capping, because the last fight was against the greatest fighter of all time. You know, SBG's own lightweight. Record scratch, not Conor McGregor.
Choo-choo, motherfucker.
Artem Lobov. Chris Gruetzemacher with the lost Artem Lobov, a guy who's just slowly under 500. And oh, by the way, Artem Lobov knocked him out. Then Gruetzemacher beats Abner Lavares. That's cool. It was 4 years, 10 months ago. Loses to Chaz Skelly. Loses to Davi Ramos. Beat Joe Lozon over 2 years ago. That's the problem. For Chris Gruetzemacher, I know he spent time, and you can see it up on the graphic there, with New Bern Fitness, or Karate and Fitness in New Bern, North Carolina. He spent time in Vegas as well getting ready. But Chris Gruetzemacher, such a wild card. And the trouble here is the guy has good boxing. I know you're going to go after it. 68 inches of reach, whether that's official or not, you get it from the UFC website, you cross-reference it, you do the best you can. He's going to be at a huge disadvantage in terms of reach in this fight against Alexander Hernandez. The trouble for Hernandez, and it's been to his detriment in his last 3 fights, he extends a lot into his punches. Can Gruetzemacher catch him? Sure he could. Will that happen in this fight? And if Chris Gruetzemacher is going to win, how would he win a fight like this?
So, okay, just before I get to any of those questions, let me break down Alexander Hernandez a little bit, because this fight I do think is the best thing that could have ever happened to him. Alexander Hernandez, a fighter who was very much a victim of his own hype, because he came into the UFC, and again, people know there's not a bigger Beneil Dariush fan in the world than your boy right here, but he did come in absolutely starches Dariush in the first round. You're like, wow, like Alexander Hernandez, he's this crazy prospect, he's super explosive, he's a big guy for the division, he's young, he speaks well, like he checks a lot of those boxes, and you're like, wow, sky must be the limit. And then, of course, the whole Cowboy fight. Now, that fight was a learning experience for Hernandez, and I really thought it would have been kind of one of those, oh, this is the best thing that could happen to you, because so you fight Dariush, you knock him out, you're not going to get an easy fight after that. You're getting Cowboy. If you beat him, then wow, we're talking about like top 10 matchups. And then before the Cowboy fight, though, of course, he had that OAM fight. Now, that was the first fight where I started to question Alexander Hernandez a little bit, because it was a very grappling-heavy fight where we saw a lot of the wrestling of Hernandez. And against a guy like OAM, it is hard to look good against him just because he does have such a smothering style. It's hard to create a lot of distance and land strikes. But Hernandez was able to out-wrestle him, but I thought, okay, maybe this isn't the guy who's going to be in the top 10 and destroy everyone. And then, of course, lose the Cowboy, no big deal. The Master Anduba fight against Trinaldo was weird because it's not that he performed all that poorly in that fight. It's just he could never really get a hold of Francisco Trinaldo. The movement was really giving him a lot of problems, but he ended up getting the win. And then they matched up with Drew Dober. And I was kind of upset because the UFC, they don't do a great job building up their young stars. And I understand Drew Dober, he's not the biggest knockout threat because if you look at his UFC career, he doesn't have a ton of knockout wins. But right before that fight, he flatlined Nasrat Haqparast, who again was one of these prospects who's on a big run, had a ton of power, and Drew Dober went out there and finished him. So it wasn't the best matchmaking for Alexander Hernandez, and all of that was due to the fact that he had such a spectacular debut in the UFC. Chris Gruetzemacher, I don't really know what he can offer to Alexander Hernandez because Chris Gruetzemacher, I don't have him as like a top 25 guy. And I'm not trying to be hard on him, but you've been out for this long. And the Joe Lozon fight, you look at Joe Lozon, yes, traditionally and historically, he's been a very durable fighter. But even Joe Lozon 2.5 years ago when he fought Gruetzemacher, he's so old in his career. And he's not a guy who accepts damage really to the same degree that he used to be able to. When you look back at the wars that he's had, both fights against Jim Miller, for instance, like Joe Lozon can take an absolute beating.
Great coach. And he ended his career, hopefully, with a win over Jonathan Pierce. But yeah, that Gruetzemacher fight, I mean, it is what it is, really. And I hate to say that.
It was, and it was a corner stoppage too, but Gruetzemacher did look good. The issue I have, though, is he's taken this much time off since that fight. And it's not like he went into that fight and we saw a new Chris Gruetzemacher and that's what beat Joe Lozon. He won that fight doing the things that kind of got him into the dance. But the issue is, I don't think the bare bones game of Chris Gruetzemacher is one of those top 15 level guys. I think Alexander Hernandez, his ceiling, I do think we'll see him with a number next to his name eventually in the UFC again. I still think he's fairly young. I think he's got a lot of potential. I just think that there's a few things that he kind of has to shore up with his striking defense. And if he gets a win over Chris Gruetzemacher, build him back up from kind of the foundation level of UFC talent. Do what you did with like a Sage Northcutt or a Mickey Gall. Maybe do it a little bit faster, of course, because I do think, skill-wise, Alexander Hernandez is a very talented mixed martial artist, but I do think this is all Hernandez. He's the better wrestler. He's got more power. I think jiu-jitsu's better. I think his boxing's better. Chris Gruetzemacher, he has, I would say, above average power, but he doesn't have a really high volume or a really high work rate to where he's throwing so many punches he might be able to catch Hernandez with, something on an exit. I think Hernandez has got this one in the bag, and I really don't see how he loses.
And that's the thing that I can see. I mean, if Hernandez does continue to overextend himself on some of those shots, Gruetzemacher with the he's always had this reach. Since he grew into his body, he's had this reach. It's not like it's gotten bigger. Yeah, he hasn't. They haven't locked anything off.
He's become Sean Shirk as he's aged.
So for Chris Gruetzemacher, he definitely understands distance. Being at that disadvantage, especially at a weight class like this, where you're not one of the bigger guys. So having a boxing background would definitely help, especially to pot shots in close, especially if you have a guy like that struggles with range that's longer and a guy like Hernandez. Maybe there's an opportunity for Chris Gruetzemacher, a.k.a. Sean Shirk 2.0. I mean, hey, it got him to a championship, so who knows?
Steroids helped though.
Now, I look at this fight, and out of the total Tapology picks, 729, you have 94% going Hernandez, 53% of them predicting him to get the win by knockout. He's also one of the bigger favorites on this card. Hernandez opened a minus 350. Some early money came in on Chris Gruetzemacher to the tune of Hernandez becoming the minus 250 favorite. He's now a minus 352 favorite. If I look over at Gruetzemacher's line just for fun, open plus 285, dip to a plus 200, now at a plus 273. So odds makers had it overwhelmingly for Hernandez. The fans have it for Hernandez. I tried to give Chris Gruetzemacher a chance to win. It is difficult in this fight. Again, maybe he gets in tight and hits Hernandez with something wild. Maybe lands a nice uppercut and flatlines Hernandez. Crazier things have happened. But yeah, I mean, I definitely feel safe to pick Hernandez. Like I said, he's been cornering a lot of top fighters with Factory X. You're definitely in a good position to train with some of the best fighters in the world there. I mean, Ian Heinisch was there for a time, and then he got Bangkok ready. Again, Yusuf Salal. The list goes on and on with fighters from that gym. For Chris Gruetzemacher, working on his fitness. She's my witness. Ooh. But apart from that, I don't know. It really is difficult there.
So, again, I like the matchmaking for Alexander Hernandez. I think he's a guy who you do want to build up. And I don't think he's a guy who is ready to fight, top 20 guys every time out there. Build him up. Let him fight, the Chris Gruetzemachers. Let him fight the Jim Millers, the Scott Holtzmans. The guys who can give you exciting fights and are going to give you a lot of looks and make you a better martial artist as you fight them and gives you experience. I think he should be able to get the win over Gruetzemacher. I don't see this being the most competitive fight ever. But after Hernandez beats Gruetzemacher, you would assume that he is going to pick up in level.
Give me another prospect versus prospect fight. I want to see Roosevelt Roberts and Alexander Hernandez. Let's get crazy, Matt. We both have Alexander Hernandez in this fight. It's a great card. A lot of under-the-radar fights. Your co-main event, Bryce Mitchell, Andre Fili, Touchy Fili, creepy nickname. In your main event, you get the Spider, another creepy one. Anderson Silva taking on Uriah Hall. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it.